LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESPS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. It's Monday, September 13th, and on your screen is a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 8:55 p.m. Pacific time launch from Space Launch Complex 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base. My name is Yomei Zhou, and I'm a propulsion engineer here at SpaceX, joining you from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California, a little under 200 miles south of our launch pad today. We're excited to be covering our first West Coast Starlink mission and our first launch from Vandenberg this year. The last mission that launched from Space Launch Complex 4E was the Sentinel-6A mission in 2020, and this will be our 16th launch of Starlink satellites this year and our 32nd to date. As many of you already know, Starlink is a satellite internet constellation designed and manufactured by SpaceX to provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people living in remote and rural locations around the globe. Our beta service is now available in a growing number of places across the globe, including the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, New Zealand, Isle of Man, Jersey, Australia, Austria, France, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Ireland, Switzerland, Portugal, Chile, and Poland. To date, over 500,000 people have placed an order or put down a deposit for Starlink. More than 100,000 user terminals have shipped, and with every launch, we get closer to connecting more people around the world. We are now at T-minus 12 minutes and 45 seconds, and all systems are still go for an on-time liftoff at 8:55 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, we'll take a closer look at the rocket that's just peeking through the clouds there on your screen. Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since T-minus 35 minutes, and that's our two-stage liquid-fueled rocket on your screen right now. The Falcon 9 vehicle stands 229 feet tall, or slightly taller than a 21-story building, and this will be the second time that a booster flies for its 10th mission. The bottom two-thirds of the vehicle that you can barely see there is the first stage, and you may be able to just make out the soot markings left over from its previous 9 flights. The first stage is what accelerates the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere into space with the help of 9 Merlin engines at the base of the rocket. We will be attempting to recover the first stage today on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, as you can see on your screen there, and this will be the first time that the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship supports a West Coast mission. On the top of the first stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage, and on top of that is the Falcon 9 second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine. Once the first and second stages separate about 2.5 minutes into the mission, the MVAC engine will ignite and carry the Starlink satellites to a polar orbit around the Earth. You'll also notice the large nose cone at the very top of the rocket, and this is the fairing. That's where the stack of Starlink satellites is currently safely enclosed. The fairing protects the satellites from aerothermal heating, aerodynamic loads, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we'll jettison the fairing as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. Like our booster, the fairing halves protecting our Starlink payload today are also flight-proven. This will be the third flight of one of the fairing halves and the second flight for the other half. One half supported our Turksat 5A and GPS 3 missions, and the other half supported our NROL 108 mission last year. Today's flight will be our 24th mission with reflown fairings and the 43rd and 44th refurbished fairing half flown. And we'll be attempting to recover the fairing halves again today using our recovery vessel NRC Quest, which previously supported a Dragon recovery mission. The latest weather forecast shows 100% favorable for liftoff Winds are light, so the evening marine layer that you can see there may linger and affect visibility. But with that, the vehicle, satellites, weather, and range are all looking good for an on-time liftoff just a few minutes from now. If for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity on Tuesday, September 14th at 8:56 p.m. Pacific time or September 15th at 3:56 UTC. With every Starlink launch, network capacity will increase, allowing Starlink to serve more people in more areas around the globe. Starlink is already delivering high-speed broadband internet to remote areas that previously had limited or no internet access. Recently, the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma began a pilot program installing Starlink in rural locations across the reservation. Without reliable internet, residents had limited access to healthcare, telemedicine, and education opportunities. But through this pilot program, Starlink has the opportunity to help connect the Cherokee Nation with the kind of resources that can make a huge difference. Starlink is also being piloted in Sotomo and Calete Sierra, Chile, two remote towns impacted by the digital divide. Sotomo, the first pilot site, is in a forested area in southern Chile, and only 20 families live in the town. The second pilot site is Calete Sierra on the coast, about 1,200 miles north of Sotomo. Using tablets provided by the Education Ministry, the remote school in Sotomo, which currently has about 7 students, can now access online learning material, visit virtual museums, and make video calls. Starlink was designed for remote communities just like Sotomo and Calete Sierra, where high-speed connectivity can have a transformational impact. And the Starlink team is eager to support these pilot programs, starting with local schools. And today's launch of Starlink satellites will bring us another step closer in delivering high-speed broadband internet to those who need it most. The Starlink satellites launching today represent a huge leap forward as the team continues to iterate and improve Starlink technology. Most satellites don't speak to each other directly. Instead, they use radio frequency communications with a ground station to relay communications between satellites. The Starlink satellites launching today will be testing fully operational optical inter-satellite links, otherwise known as space lasers, to provide direct communications between the satellites without a ground station acting as an intermediary. Fewer pings to ground stations means Starlink will be able to both expand and improve service, especially in very remote areas. All future Starlink satellites will feature optical space lasers. As we mentioned at the top of the webcast, today's mission is launching from Space Launch Complex 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base, which is ideally suited for payloads going to a polar orbit. By launching to a polar orbit, these satellites will be able to see almost all the way to the poles, providing near global coverage. This means Starlink will be able to expand service in Alaska, Scandinavia, and other polar regions. And on top of all that, the team continues to iterate and improve production of Starlink hardware. So we're currently developing a next-generation Starlink user terminal that can be manufactured much faster and more efficiently than previous versions. All of these ongoing advancements translate to better internet access for more people in more places than ever before. You heard the call out that the Stage 1 fuel loading has just completed, and in just a few minutes, Falcon 9 will lift off, carrying our upgraded Starlink satellites and their new optical space lasers to a polar orbit. Now, in order to get these satellites into space, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It also has to go sideways really, really fast. So at liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down on the rocket. As we extend, we actually tilt the engines, also known as gimbaling, and this turns the rocket horizontally. We're still going up, but now we're also headed horizontally away from the launch pad. This is what we call a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and actually get into orbit. To help demonstrate this concept, imagine firing a cannon from a really high mountain. The cannonball will arc and then gravity will pull it down to Earth. As you increase the power, the cannonball will arc and land further and further away. Eventually, if you could continue to increase the power, the cannonball will be going so fast that it ends up in free fall around the Earth. Gravity is still pulling down on the cannonball, but it's going so fast that it never hits the ground. This arc, which constantly misses the Earth, is called an orbit. So when we lift off today, keep an eye on the orientation of Falcon 9. You'll see it go straight up until about T plus 10 seconds, at which point it will begin to shift in orientation so that Falcon 9 can also go sideways really fast. But before we get to that, let's check in on the status of the vehicle for today's launch. We are currently a little over T minus 4 minutes from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We are currently waiting for the transporter erector, or TE, to retract, and that's that truss structure that you can probably barely see right now to the right of the vehicle. First, the TE clamps will open, and then the transporter erector will begin to retract away from the rocket slightly, and at T0, hydraulics pull the TE farther away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. Now the transporter erector provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing.
Stage 1 LOX loads complete.
Stage 1 LOX loading is complete here at T minus 3 minutes. And the second stage is also nearing fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Super chilled liquid oxygen is our propellant oxidizer, and that is what is creating those white clouds that you see around Falcon 9 along kind of through the mist. And that's because the warm, humid ambient air is causing that liquid oxygen to turn into gas. Now the first stage just finished prop loading at T minus 3 minutes, and the second stage will be finishing up at T minus 2 minutes. At T minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup, and this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will have taken over the launch countdown. And just inside of T minus 2 seconds, we will light the Merlin 1D engines, and we're set to lift off. The Starlink payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is still looking favorable, and the range is green for launch. Here at just under T minus 2 minutes, let's listen in to the terminal countdown.
Stage 2 LOX loads complete.
Stage 2 LOX loading is complete. You can see that white cloud that's just puffed up on the right of the booster there is venting from the TE LOX line. This is normal and expected. It joins that beautiful view from Vandenberg with the marine layer and the fog, with Falcon 9 there peeking out in the middle. We're just about 10 seconds away from the Falcon 9's flight computers taking over the countdown.
Flight computers in startup.
The Falcon 9 flight computer is in startup. The Stage 1 and Stage 2 tanks are beginning to pressurize for launch.
Go for launch.
The launch director has just given the final go for launch. All systems are go. Let's listen in to the terminal countdown and watch as Falcon 9 takes our 51 Starlink satellites into orbit.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
What a beautiful view of Falcon 9 as it successfully lifts off from Pad 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base, carrying our stack of 51 Starlink satellites to orbit. Now, moments ago, we throttled the engines down in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure on the engines, and that is coming up in just about 10 seconds here.
Supersonic. Max Q.
We did just pass through max Q, and in a minute we will have 3 events happening in back-to-back in rapid succession, and that's main engine cutoff, or MECO, stage separation, and second engine startup 1. Now, first, main engine cutoff, or MECO. This is where all 9 M1D engines will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, where
MVAC engine chill started.
where the first and second stage will separate, with the first stage making its way back down to Earth for landing, and the second stage continuing on its journey to the third event, or second engine startup 1. And this is where the MVAC engine lights up and propels the second stage along with the Starlink satellites to orbit. We're about 30 seconds from main engine cutoff, and you can see that beautiful plume of the rocket as it is soaring in the sky.
MECO.
You can see the light from the engine. The light from that first stage engine cutoff.
MVAC ignition confirmed.
For main engine cutoff, you saw the successful stage separation, and the second stage engine has started up from those live views on your right there. That is
Fairing separation confirmed.
the Merlin vacuum engine, and here we are waiting for fairing separation. You can see that great view of the 2 fairing halves separating from the Starlink satellites. Today's flight marks the 24th time SpaceX has reflown the Falcon fairing halves since November of 2019. And again, this was our second flight for one of the fairing halves and a third for the other half. And we'll be attempting to recover the halves again today using our recovery vessel, NRC Quest, which previously supported Dragon recovery missions. You can see stage 2 here with the MVAC engine lit up and carrying our Starlink payload to orbit. And with the stage 2 headed towards its targeted drop-off orbit, stage 1 will be executing 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite, and this helps to slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is the landing burn, and this is a single engine burn that brings the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship. If you're just catching up with us, we had a successful launch of Falcon 9 from Vandenberg Space Force Base, Slick 4E, and you're looking at a live view of Falcon 9's second stage as it delivers our Starlink payload to orbit.
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
Both stage 1 and stage 2 are on nominal trajectories right now, with stage 1 is cruising back to our drone ship. Of course, I still love you in the Pacific Ocean, sorry. As a reminder, today's mission marks the 10th flight for this particular booster, the second flight for one fairing half, and the third flight for the other half. Reusability is critical to what we do at SpaceX. It allows us to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, which in turn drives down the cost of space access. Now the stage 1 entry burn should be coming up here in a little under a minute, and this will be a 20-second burn of that first stage. Some of you may know that Falcon 9 is named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, and the number 9 indicates the number of Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level, and these achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent, and the MVAC engine, or Merlin vacuum engine that you see on your screen right now, is optimized for 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
What a cool view on your left of the stage 1 entry burn startup there. This is a 20-second burn of 3 of the Merlin 1D engines of the first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
We did
Both
have
vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
we did
Stage
have
1 FTS is saved.
we did have a successful stage 1 entry burn, and you can see those super cool live views from the stage 1 there as it is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. We can't quite make it out from those stage 1 views, but there is a lot of soot on that first stage of the booster, and that is because the rocket-grade kerosene, or RP1, that is used as a fuel in Falcon 9 is carbon-based, and when it burns, it generates that
Stage 1
soot.
transonic.
And then as the booster approaches its landing site during descent, it does this long re-entry burn, which we just saw, that slows it down prior to re-entering the atmosphere. And when it re-enters with its engines first, the booster actually flies through its own plume, which deposits the
Terminal
soot
guidance.
on the rocket. Now, stage 1 landing burn should be starting here very
Stage
shortly.
1 landing burn.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 landing burn has just started. That is our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean. As you can see from that beautiful
Stage 1
view
landing confirmed.
of stage 1, having landed on our drone ship for the 10th time, this marks our 90th overall successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage and the
Nominal orbit insertion.
124th successful launch of a Falcon 9. We just missed it, but we did have a successful second engine cutoff 1 and a confirmation of a good orbit. Up next, we will have a coast phase followed by the second burn of our second stage engine. These additional burns allows us to modify the orbits of our payloads more efficiently than launching directly into the final orbit. So today, our second stage will coast for about 35 minutes until we reach apogee, or the highest point of the orbit, where we will conduct that second stage burn. You can follow the progress of the second stage with this animation showing where we are around the Earth and we'll see you back here at T plus 44 minutes, 30 seconds for our second engine start 2.
Expected loss of signal, Vandenberg.
Welcome back. We have just a quick correction. We actually just have one burn from our West Coast Vandenberg launches. So the Starlink satellites actually deployed at T plus 15 minutes and 33 seconds, but we won't actually be able to confirm deployment until we get to a ground station over Argentina at T plus 26 minutes and 16 seconds. So we'll be back around then with an update. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Welcome back to our broadcast for our Starlink mission. If you're just joining us, a quick recap of today's mission. We had a successful liftoff from Vandenberg Space Force Base at 8:55 p.m. Pacific time. We then had a successful stage separation, recovered our first stage.
Acquisition of signal, Punta Arenas.
After its 10th flight on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You.
Deploy confirmed.
And had a successful second stage MVAC startup. And of course, we just had confirmation of a successful Starlink deploy. Again, this deploy happened some minutes ago, but we were waiting for that ground station coverage, which we just got to confirm that deployment. And now these satellites will begin to slowly separate from the second stage. They actually have already separated, and over the course of the next few days and weeks, they will distance themselves from each other and use their onboard ion thrusters to make their way to their operational orbit. And with that, that brings today's webcast to a close. Thank you to the Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. And of course, thank you to all of our viewers and all of our Starlink customers for using our beta service at this time. If you're interested in being a part of our beta program, head over to starlink.com and sign up. Hope you enjoyed the webcast today, as always, and we'll see you soon.